Well, Mike, thanks so much for joining me today. Just looking forward to great conversation and learning how to handle this inner critic.
Oh, well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. Um,
Absolutely. So typically, I just let everybody share a little bit about how they got started, and
mhm,
mostly it's asking how they got started in entrepreneurship. But how do you get started as an author and focusing on this inner critic?
mhm. Well, it's actually been a long journey. I first, my first conscious awareness happened when I decided to enroll in graduate school. Prior to that, I had a sparkling 2.3 GPA, that was just, a little better than a C as an undergrad. And I never had any, it never even occurred to me that graduate school was an option. And it just never, because I think I lacked that conscious awareness of my self sabotage. So I just kind of went along and I just thought I'm kind of destined to live this marginal life. And when what happened was that a lot of my colleagues started telling me, Mike, you need to get your master's degree. You can do a lot more. And there's other people that you're working with that are um, getting promotions, and you're better than they are, but they have their degree. And I'm like, oh gosh. Well, eventually that chorus of voices started to challenge my inner voice. And I was like, they must be crazy. But finally, I decided I'll take one course. And if I don't get an A in that course, then that means I'm not smart enough for graduate school.
That sounds like a
Yeah,
setup.
that there you go, exactly. So, so what happens is the course was Saturday morning, 3 hours once a week, and it was downtown Philadelphia, Temple University, and I would drive down there and get there, and it was so interesting. I still was not aware of my inner critic's presence in that form at that point, but every week as it got closer to that class time, my anxiety would get higher and higher and higher. And by Friday afternoon, I was working at an adolescent rehab. I was thinking, how can these people not see how crazy I am with this anxiety? Is just pulsating, and but apparently I was a good actor and was able to get through it. But Friday morning or Saturday morning, I would get up and drive about a half hour or so. But this one morning, it was a huge thunderstorm, and our electricity went out. It was before cell phones, so I was running late, and I'm running out the door, putting on a t-shirt, and it's huge, horrible, horrible thunderstorm, rain coming down like crazy, and I get in the car and I drive, and then as I'm going, I'm realizing I'm never going to get there on time. I'm never going to get there, and so I'm driving along, and then I think to myself, you know what? You should probably just turn around. You're going to be soaking wet. You're going to be late. Turn around. So I did a U-turn, but to me, I call that uh, my St. Paul moment. It was like lightning struck me because I was like, oh my gosh, I felt such a huge sense of relief that like it was palpable. I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck just happened? So I pulled over to the side and I started to challenge and I said, you know what? I think the concern was not about just getting out of this class this one time. As I reflected, I realized that if I miss a class, again with my sparkling, grade point average, if I miss a class that's 3 hours once a week, the chances of me getting an A are greatly reduced. So I said, I don't care, you dirty so and so, you are getting your butt to class. And I walked in, and I was soaking wet, and it was an hour and a half into the class, but I forced myself to do it. And finally, after several more weeks, I did get my A. But I think it was, even then, I was not aware of kind of like just beginning to understand how this inner critic was working on me. And I'm convinced I had very loving parents. My mom is still around. My dad died about 20 years ago, but he was a sergeant in the Marine Corps and was pretty tough minded, you know. Um, and he, I think, was the basis of my inner critic, which is kind of my theory that our inner critics don't originate within us. They originate from our interactions with other people. And when we're kids, and I write about this in my book, Win the War with Your Inner Critic, that uh, what happens is kids misinterpret parental intentions. and they just read anger or disappointment and don't recognize those things. So I use this example with my grandson when he was, he's 9 now, but he was about 7 at the time. And I went over to visit him and I said, "How you doing, bud?" He said, "Oh, I'm doing great, Grandpa. Mom was showing me how to ride my bike." And I said, "Oh, that's great." He goes, "But she got really, really upset with me and mad at me." And I said, "Oh, what do you mean?" He said, "She yelled at me." And I'm thinking, that doesn't quite sound like her. I can't imagine what she's yelling at him about. And then I said, "Well, what did she yell?" And he says, "Look out for that car. You're going to get killed." Okay. But, but he's interpreting that as she's angry at him and disappointed with him. And so I explained to him the concept of intensity born out of love and anger. And they're two different things. So that's kind of where I kind of started to recognize how I forced myself to go back to school again. I got the second A, and then I got a third course I took, I got an A minus. And I was beating myself up about getting an A minus. I don't know I don't imagine that everybody who goes to graduate school gets straight A's, although, with great inflation these days, not sure. But anyway, but I had 2 A's and an A minus. And I remember I was calling my dad up to tell him. And I said, "Dad, just want to let you know I got my 3rd grade." And he said, "Oh, how'd you do?" And I said, A minus. And it was another earth-shattering event because he said to me, I was expecting him to go, "A minus. Now you can never get a perfect GPA ever again. It goes on and on. No matter how many A's you get, it will always be 3.999. And instead, he said to me, "I'm proud of you, son." And it was in that moment that I recognized my dad had long ago given up that stuff, but I continued in my own head. And so I continued to live, not a marginal lifestyle, but certainly not a go-getter. And I had excuses. And I also think that it becomes a Dennis Waitley. I don't know if you're familiar with him. I loved his work. It may be a little dated now, but his series that I listened to on cassettes years ago was The Psychology of Winning. And in it, he talks about activities that are tension relieving rather than goal achieving. And that's what I found, that there was an awful lot of tension relieving. And the problem is that they're only temporary reliefs. Right. And then you got to do it more. So then they become addictions. And that's how that goes.
Well, there's so much good in there. Like the intensity versus anger is so powerful. For me, the example I remember was my daughter was taking riding lessons and to be a hunter jumper and so riding in an arena and her trainer is yelling at her. And so she says, "The trainer's mad at me. I keep goofing up and she's mad at me." I'm like, I didn't see that. Right. Like, and my daughter was interpreting intensity as anger. And I wish I'd had that language at the time, because all I could say was, "I'm pretty sure that's not true." And I wasn't able to help her process that in a better way. And so I appreciate that take on that. And then I'm very familiar with the father's voice. My father was very intense dad. And I would say angry. Like he definitely had some anger moments. My mom even accused him of, "You're going to kill him." So,
yeah, right.
So those moments were definitely at least real enough that but that stopped years and years ago, and yet the critic in my head continued with that same voice of
narrative, sure,
disappointment, and it was my own disappointment voiced in my dad's voice,
right?
And that was the challenge of recognizing that, wait a minute, that's the story I'm telling myself, and I'm putting those words in his voice. That's not necessarily true for how he really feels about me, and that's powerful once you recognize that and realize, wait a minute, I'm putting an awful lot on my dad that isn't really there.
Right.
Whew.
Right.
Not to mention the impact it had on our relationship.
Yeah. Well, that's I think it was to my dad's credit. He finally got old, okay, and worn out, Well, and Yeah, I'm one of 8 kids. I'm the second oldest. And I remember my youngest sister, who was about 10 years younger than me, I had just got married. I came home to visit. And in the past, my dad would yell up the stairs, Michael, come down here. And I don't care what you're doing. I mean, if you're on the toilet, you better be running down, you know? I mean, it's just, you got to get down there. So, and if you didn't, he'd be taking, I can still see him taking 4 steps at a time, running up to grab our butt and drag us down. And so I could tell he was kind of getting a little bit older, and our relationship had even more of an opportunity to kind of develop when he says to my sister, Brenda, get down here right now. And she yells, no, I'm not coming down. And I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, like where's 911? Yeah, signed her death warrant, you know, all that stuff. And then he just goes and says to my mom, Rita, will you get her down here? And I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, what the heck happened here? You know, this is a completely different story, you know.
For my dad, when I came back from, one of the things my parents argued about was dishes, and my mom would just, you know, she'd cook and then she'd be tired and she'd leave the dishes in the sink, and my dad would just, you know, 20 years yelling and screaming and fighting over these stupid dishes. And I came back, you know, and there at the end of the meal, Dad got up and Dad washed the dishes. I'm like, wow, like, that's okay. Well, why did it take 25 years to figure that out?
Right. Yeah.
That's a fantastic solution. Why did it take 25 years to apply?
Right. Yep. There you go. So and I think the other thing is that a couple of the themes that I focus on with folks are our language, which I think the words we tell ourselves are so important. And also what our experiences are. And this has applications for parents, teachers, anybody. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One of them is the concept of, I don't know if you may well be familiar with the concept of fibromyalgia. Okay. Well, I think that if we took 5 people and we all went to some research place and they tested us for levels of pain tolerance, and we all scored exactly the same, all 5 of us exactly the same. So now coincidentally, all 5 of us go out and we break our pinky in the exact same space, go to separate doctors, whatever. They fix the splint, and then they ask us on a scale. Well, first of all, of the 5 people, one of them says, I'm not going to a doctor. That's too expensive. You know. So now you're down to 4. So the first one that goes in there, when the doctor says, what's your pain tolerance or pain on a scale of 1 to 10? And she says 7. And it should be 7 then for the rest of us. Objectively speaking, that's what it is. However, my wife, she says 2. I say 10. And another guy says 10. Okay. So then I think that what happens in terms of accounting for those differences is the one who said 7 was accurate. My wife says 2. And then I'm driving away with her in the car, and she'll say to me, you know, Mike, my finger is killing me. I said, well, why'd you tell the doctor it's a 2? I don't want him to think I'm a baby. And you know, and then me, I said 10 because I'm drug seeking.
That's right.
And then, you know, why never let a crisis go to waste, you know, like, you know, so I went, and the other person though, he said 10 because in terms of his perception of any level of pain, he'd been wrapped in bubble wrap his entire life. His parents took care of him. So a mere slap on the wrist was the worst he had ever felt physically. So this has got to be at least a 10. And I think that similarly, we do the same thing with our emotions, that people have emotional fibromyalgia because everything is too hard. They talk themselves out of it. The voices of their critics are enlarged so much and what have you. And I think it's a useful concept to think about what is going on with that other person when they're saying, no, I can't do this, you know? And then sometimes I always found that when I say, oh, yes, you can do this, it didn't go, oh, okay, thanks for telling me that, Mike. I can go. You know, that would be nice if it ever did.
Mike, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. I wouldn't have known that. And so I think understanding and having empathy for those individuals and recognizing that we can relate kind of on the same level that for them to have that instinctual knee-jerk reaction is based on some things that maybe they've heard about themselves or they've come to believe, and that becomes an issue. And I forget who it is. It's a famous philosopher who said, an unexamined, no, I think it was Plato or Socrates, one of those two. An unexamined life is not worth living. And I always say, with a lot of the folks I work with, yes, that's true. And an overexamined life will drive you nuts.
Absolutely.
And that's, I think a lot of people are like, what's going on? What's going on? And it always comes back to what's wrong with me. What's wrong with me?
Well, so there's a lot in there. So I love the language, right? Obviously, I think not only do the words we tell ourselves matter, but I think they're powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think many people don't recognize that they control that voice. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And so helping people to see they control that voice and they can change the story that that voice is telling. Those are huge powers. But on the emotional side, I agree with you, because there's no class on understanding your emotions and then how to experience your emotions fully. And so, our sons, you and I both have had sons, deal with that teenage year, 15, 16, 17. Anger tends to be a feeling, and they don't understand how to express it. And so they either break their cell phone or they break their car or they punch holes in their walls. And really what we're trying to, and of course our parental wisdom is don't be angry.
Right.
rather than
right.
let's explore this and understand what is this anger telling you about yourself? What is this anger telling you about your body? And when I recognize that for me, emotions are like the dashboard. They're like a check engine light. And so I should want to feel all of those emotions, because every one of those emotions, from sadness to this happy to that anger, are all telling me something, not about the world, about myself.
Right.
And we don't teach that. And so helping people understand that you can experience your emotions all the way through. You don't have to stop them and stuff them inside, which creates terrible anxiety and stress, which of course keeps people living in fight, flight, and freeze mode, which of course the brain handles really well.
Right.
It's designed, fight, flight, and freeze is designed for instantaneous life-saving, not constant living.
Right.
And so the brain's putting out adrenaline instead of all these other chemicals that were made to experience. But those dopamine and oxytocin and serotonin only happen when you're experiencing those good, positive emotions.
Right. Yeah.
But people have lost all of those because they're so busy, stuck in this anxiety and stress.
And we have to hurry up and take care of it. So that's, we have the emotional fibromyalgia. So drugs, alcohol, pornography, gambling, Netflix,
or worse, we go to the doctor and we say, I just don't feel right. And the doctor starts giving us antidepressants.
Yes.
So now we've got the fight, flight, freeze chemicals from the brain, plus this cocktail that the doctor's giving us to numb us. Really, that's what those do.
Yep.
And the body's never given the chance to experience the chemicals it's designed to. So I'm all for helping people experience their emotions fully and understand that all of those emotions are okay. It's what you choose to do with them that is important, right? Taking responsibility for how you react to those things and how you respond is so valuable. But I agree. I think our culture has emotional fibromyalgia. That's a great way to put it, that we don't understand it. We don't teach it. And when you go to the doctor, his goal is to just give you aspirin to take it away. And not really, nobody on a large scale is really dealing with it. Right.
And I think that they talk about societal attention spans. I think, it's like hyperact ADHD and ADD seems to be on the rise. I think it's because we're given things in such instantaneous bites that we can never have anything. So nobody ever gets used to actually studying for an hour. That's really kind of crazy stuff.
Or waiting 3 days for a package or.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But, I use that example, to when, and I may have shared this with you before about Batman, when I was a kid and they had the original Batman Adam West series on, and they would say,
with the
It was on
pow
Thursday
and the
night. That's
wham.
right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And they have at the end of it, they always had a cliffhanger. Batman and Robin hanging over a vat of lava or something, and the Joker. They always give him a chance. Okay, we'll see you guys later. They don't stick around to the end, so they take off and they say, "Join us next week." And I remember as a kid of about 13 or 14 thinking, "Oh my God, what happens? How does he do this?" I had to wait a whole week. But now Netflix has become what I call crack TV, because if you want to watch not just an episode, you can watch the season and the series, and they pop up right after each other, 20 seconds. And even when my son was showing me about how to do Netflix on it, he goes, 20 seconds, screw that. I'm not waiting 20 seconds, like, oh my gosh,
The
And-
skip the intro, skip the credits, skip.
Yeah. And then when they get you seeing what you like, at the bottom of it, they say, "Oh, if you like crack TV, we recommend alcohol TV or marijuana TV or heroin TV," and people are like, "Oh yeah, I want to see that too." And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how many people want you at the end of their lives to be able to say, "I remember the entire dialogue of every Seinfeld episode," I mean, it just doesn't work for me. But another thing I was just going to mention is that with the language is that I think that people, if we find ways, we will find ways to put ourselves down. And I think even in some of the popular literature, the intention is not to put us down, but it's still, whether they realize it or not, is having that impact. And so when people say, "I have a bad habit," I don't think that such a thing as a bad habit exists. There's detrimental habits, and I think it becomes bad as a way for me to beat myself up and say how bad I am and how much of a loser I am because I can't overcome this habit and all that kind of stuff, and get some twirling in that. And then, of course, if I'm a smoker and I'm beating myself up and I feel horrible, well, you know what? I need to relieve the tension, so let me light up, And so we just continue that process. And I think of those things. I don't think of bad habits. I consider them misapplied strengths. Because if you consider when anybody starts smoking cigarettes, normally it's because they want to be an adult, they want to look cool, they want to be mature, whatever. It's not till later when they're addicted that they realize, oh, this stuff is not working for me anymore. So originally it was a good idea. And it was just, I was able to accomplish the goal. And now I'm saying, oh, so if I refer to it as a misapplied strength, I don't have to beat myself up. I can say, you know what, let me try something else, and how do I be kind to myself in that situation?
Well, so many of those things we feel like they're out of control, right? Like I'm addicted to that, right? I can't change. And those are the language that they use is I can't change, rather than saying this no longer serves me, I'm getting rid of it.
And then they beat themselves up in the process for every time they fall short, and then they become more acclimated to just running and getting what they were avoiding in the first place.
Oh, so powerful. And the truth is, if you make the choice in a different way and you use different language, right? Like even the language of saying I'm a smoker trying to quit versus the language of saying I'm a non-smoker who's getting right. I mean, that identity shift is powerful, and helping people see that the story you tell yourself is so powerful. One of the lessons for me was sarcasm, right? I grew up, I was pretty quick-witted and sarcastically, I could nail people pretty easily, pretty constantly. And at one point there was a realization that this is mean.
Yeah.
It's mean-spirited. It's not cute, right? And recognizing that our culture has created this little device and say, well, it's just, it's just an innocent jab. It's out of love. It's mean. And we're using words to hurt people. And in fact, we're hurting the people closest to us. And yet we culturally, people are okay with it, right? They and let it go and excuse it. And I think we just undervalue the power of words, and we undervalue the power of the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And so important to keep on checking that and keep on, asking. I think curiosity for me, it's incessant curiosity, right? How
Mhm.
can I change this? How can I shift this? How can I see myself stronger?
Right.
Asking those questions really can make a huge difference. And helping my
Mhm.
clients ask
Mhm.
themselves better questions is really
Mhm.
powerful to change their story.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I wanted to just kind of touch on an example that happened when I worked at the women's prison. I was the treatment director for the intensive treatment unit. It was a substance abuse 18 months, 12 to 18-month long program in
Wow.
Wyoming. And it was interesting. It's kind of funny because you could have, they called it Mr. McCafferty's rule. Okay. And when they would like go crazy about this, when a new person would come in, we would have a woman sitting in a group of about 30 women, and they've got all these terrible, horrible, life wrenching, horrible experiences. And they would sit there, and these women were at least, the youngest I think was maybe 24, the oldest in their 50s, and they would start emoting and crying and like snot coming out of their face, everything coming down. And the instinct of all the other women was to run over and give her a tissue. And that's Mr. McCafferty's rule. We don't do that. Okay. No, you can't do that. Mr. McCafferty doesn't like that. Well, they said, why? We're trying to be comforting. I said, well, there's two things. First of all, she's 24. She's a grown adult. She can get a tissue that's 3 feet from her. That's one thing. She doesn't need you guys to have to tell her she needs a tissue. And the second thing is, you guys all want her to feel better because it might touch on something you're uncomfortable with. So we ain't doing that, okay?
So powerful.
Yeah. So a lot of them didn't like me sometimes.
Well, and there's a tendency, right, that it's so easy to be the victim.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's definitely people that, we want to, I love that. You want her to stop telling her story and feel better because her story's hitting stuff that you're dealing with and
Right.
or not dealing with, as the
Right.
case may be. It's so powerful in a group setting, especially if somebody can, get to the root of their story and can really
Mhm.
start. We can't change the events. Obviously, we
Right.
can't change the events that have happened in our past,
Yeah.
but we can absolutely change the story we tell ourselves about them and
Mhm.
how those things can empower us or disempower us, right?
Mhm.
So is the story you're telling yourself serving you, or is it taking away your power?
Right. Right. I absolutely agree.
We will be right back after this short break. This episode is sponsored by the newly released book, The Entrepreneur Mindset Shift: Growth Characteristics of Success by Robert C. Peterson. Available on Amazon, or you can order a personalized signed copy at addvalue2life.com. Addvalue2life.com/shift. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe, leave a review, tell your friends. Welcome back. Let's get back to more greatness.
It's interesting too that I think some people that I've talked to say, well, you've got kind of a jaded view because you worked at the prison and worked in inner city rehabs and all this stuff. I said, you know what? No, the issues are common. It doesn't matter where I go or live or who I talk to. The issues are the same. I use those examples because they really illustrate, a discrepancy, not a major discrepancy between where we are, where we would like to be. It may seem like, when people change their behavior, and a guy who was living out of a dumpster had lost his family, had a great job, all that stuff, and he got to prison and had to deal with things there. It happened a couple of different times. Anyway, he said to me, Mike, the third time I went to prison, I decided it might be time for me to do something different, And I'm thinking, he lost a job that was like $250,000, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. He was really well, a family, everything. And I said, you know what, Bob, my wife yells at me and I start thinking about changing. Okay. I don't have to wait until I am so far down that that's what it has to be. And, even I think recognizing that the stories that we tell ourselves and how distorted they get and how defensive we get, especially if you add, other intoxicants or what have you.
Right.
And, and I found an interesting thing the other day that there are more marijuana dispensaries in Denver than there are McDonald's and Starbucks combined. You know, so what does that tell us? You know, so people are again anesthetizing rather than actually dealing with things. And again, if I don't accomplish anything, I don't care.
Right. Well, and there's a lot in our culture that have chosen that, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to be a victim, and it's easy to obviously it's easier to be a victim
Mm-hmm.
and blame the world, blame God, blame
Mm-hmm.
nothing works for me, karma's against me,
Right.
all these things. And of course, the more you tell yourself what all of that, guess what?
Yeah.
The more you get more of the same.
Yep.
And the bottom line is, until you take 100% responsibility for your own life and your own thoughts,
Right.
you'll continue letting the world blow you about.
Right. Right. And again, when people say to me, "I'm my own worst critic," I tell them, "Of course you are. You've been at it for 20 years, and practice makes perfect." You know. So if you and thinking about, I also think, and obviously you do as well. I like to use humor, and I used to tell the women at the prison when they can laugh at themselves about their stories, not in a down, putting themselves down way. That's a real sign of health. That's you're moving in the right direction. And I always tell people when they say to me, I worked with a lot of people with substance abuse issues. And, oh, I wish I didn't have that alcohol gene. I said, you could focus on that. I didn't get the tall gene or the thin gene, but
Or the
fortunately
good-looking one.
I got the good looking gene and the smart gene, so there you go, and then when people laugh as loud as you do, then it really starts to affect my self-esteem because it could happen. There's a little bit of truth in that. So yeah, I do think that's a very important point is how do we challenge those things? And if we do it, I find that when we do it in this attacking, get out of here, it makes them bigger. It's just like you tell a kid who's teasing you to stop it. They don't stop, they do it more. So I think there's some things that are helpful for people to come to terms with their inner critic.
Well,
And,
disempowering it, right? When it's not speaking truth,
mhm,
your first step is to disempower it. Same way with the bullies, right? Is
mhm,
if the bully has no impact on you, he'll quit picking on you.
right.
Right. But when you fight back against the bully and you're bawling and saying, that's not true. You're so mean. But
Yeah.
the bully loves that. That's what they want.
Yeah.
But if you're like, whatever, it's crazy how much and you mentioned it, right? That we're our own worst critic. And the truth is you can change that critic.
Mhm.
Why not be your own best fan?
Right.
Why not be, if nobody else in the entire world wants to be your friend, why can't you be your own friend? Right.
Right.
And let that voice in your head be your friend. And what's really crazy when you do that,
Mhm.
you'll have all the friends that you'll ever
Yeah.
need because
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
you're putting out a completely different vibe into the world and you're
Right.
attracting those kinds of people.
Yep. And I agree. I think when my wife and I ran group homes a couple of different times, and one of them was a young man, and it just cracked me up. He was just apoplectic, beside himself. He was so mad that they were teasing him, okay, and calling him names. And I said, well, what names do they call? And he was telling me, I said, what ones don't you care about? And he gave every filthy word you could imagine. They were calling him this. He didn't care about that. His name was Kirk. And he was triggered by Kirky Albuquerque, okay, because of the meaning he gave to that, but he could disregard all the others, So, and it's just amazing to me and when we step back and can laugh about it, go, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, why am I doing that? And asking ourselves that question, I think it opens up some doors for us.
Well, and it's crazy how much our own attitude can impact the bullies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're a victim, you're the ones the bully is going to pick out of a crowd,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you're saying I'm not a victim, even if you're just saying that to yourselves, the bully's going to go right by you. And
Mm-hmm.
and it's crazy. I had the opportunity. So in 8th grade, I was a tiny little skinny kid and short and not athletically capable at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I got picked on. The insurance guy's twin sons just brutalized me.
Mm.
And another guy that was their buddy, they just constant. I hated school, I hated life,
Mhm.
but our family moved. And when we moved, I said, all right, I actually changed my name. I was called Bobby right up
Mhm.
all the way up until eighth
Mhm.
grade. And we moved to Denver, and I said, nope, my name on my birth certificate is Robert. I'm
Mhm.
going to go by Robert. And in ninth grade, everything changed. And all it
Right.
was I changed. I said, no more. I'm going to enjoy
Mhm.
school. I had perfect attendance. I was on the football team. I had the lead role
Mm.
in school play, and
Mhm.
everybody wanted to hang out with me.
Mhm.
It flip flopped completely. And the only thing that changed was what I believed about
Mhm.
myself.
Yeah.
And and I wish I'd applied that power sooner in my life, because now looking back, I'm like, oh, look how powerful that switch was.
Oh, so
I
you can have your inner critic beat you up for not doing what you can't change.
right, right.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
Good. 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 That's a good
I
one. Yeah.
I mean, truly, I think it's a lifetime pursuit, right? Like that
Mhm.
inner
Yeah.
critic he's a sneaky booger.
Yeah.
And no matter what level you are of success, he's still gonna go, wait,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
He's not gonna go away.
Yeah.
The difference is what you choose to do with it, right? What you
Right.
choose to,
Right.
and
And I think, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
I was just thinking that our power to actually program that voice
Mhm.
is so underrated, right? Like
Yeah.
we need more people teaching people A, how to recognize when that voice is lying, and B,
Mhm.
how to handle it, right? How to reprogram it to
Mhm.
get what you want.
Right. No, I agree with you. I think that in my experience, it evolves as to, because one of the things I always say is that the progress is the enemy of our comfort zone, and our inner critic guards the comfort zone with ferocity. So it doesn't want anybody to do something that's uncomfortable. Oh my gosh, you feel uncomfortable, so I have to self-medicate or whatever. And and I think also that it's about the changes that we make. With me, as I pushed through and I first started like fighting the inner critic, like, oh, I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna get this. And I would, but it really sucked the joy out of it, and it was like so much harder. And then I realized that I didn't have to fight myself on that. But then what happened was I would set a new goal, and my inner critic would say to me, oh, Mike, look how much you've accomplished. You don't need to do this. Come here, give me a hug. Let's have a cupcake and sit and watch Netflix, you know? And I'd be like, okay, yeah, it'll only be for a minute. And then I wake up with crumbs coming out of my mouth, 5 hours later, I wake up at nighttime. And I think that it does evolve to meet the circumstances, because it's still got that same goal. And
You
that's where it
deserve
wants us to be.
you deserve this. Look, you've earned it.
Yeah. Come here, give me a hug. Oh, okay. Okay, I'll give you a hug.
You deserve a break.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, look, you are so unbelievable, you know? And I think, I was also working as a therapist, and it was probably around, I don't remember the exact times, they get a little mixed up sometimes, but I worked at that agency for 3 years when I got my graduate degree, or started it. And I remember I'm well known for a pretty good sense of humor. Now, the thing is that I overuse it. It became a misapplied strength for me at the workplace. And so everybody just thought I was a joke. And so whenever they would say something in a serious meeting, they'd all look at me for like, where's the punchline? And I would deliver one. And then I started to get upset, because then I would try to say something serious and no one would listen to me. And I had to make a conscious effort to not, hit that softball out of the park when they lob me a big softball. Just don't. And it took me about 9 months to retrain them that it wasn't I was a joke who happened to be a therapist. I was a good therapist with a sense of humor. And because then I had reworked those relationships, but it also began with me doing that, recognizing it within myself, instead of spiraling out and going, oh, these people were so mean and I'm a victim, and, I should quit this job, all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. That little voice, and of course, if you get your popularity by being the joke, then
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's
Oh, yeah.
where
That was great. Yeah.
that's where you get stuck. But then, wait a
Mhm.
minute, I'm I'm smart. I'm serious.
right, right, right.
That was a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. And if you think about it, how many comedians do you hear about that either purposely or otherwise kill themselves?
Mm.
You know, and so they're good at putting on a front. And also, I read recently that counseling or mental health workers have a statistically significant rate of suicide.
Mm.
And I think that also has to do with their inability to separate and, and some of those kind of things. But, it also is, how good when women at the prison also would say to me, Miss McCaffrey, I miss my kids so much. And I was such a horrible mom and I did all these terrible things. And I said, let me know if beating yourself up helps you be a better mom, then keep it up. Okay. And I can even send you a text every day telling you how messed up you are. Okay. So I don't want you to forget, man, are you messed up, And so and if we think about it, when we are beating ourselves up, how can we put our best foot forward?
Mm.
If we're beating ourselves up, we either avoid it then, or we come out with a lot of that anger and frustration without being able to
Which is
effectively
so,
communicate.
it's so disempowering, right? I mean, really all you're doing is disempowering yourself by repeating that story to yourself. Oh, I'm terrible, I'm terrible, I'm terrible, I'm terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And of course that you're going to show up in the world looking terrible and feeling terrible, rather than being a good person who's made some mistakes.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's, I think, when I talk to people about affirmations and positive self-talk, they say, yeah, I try it and it doesn't work. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Well, why do you think it doesn't work? Well, I don't know. I say it a few times and I forget. I said, who do you think is undermining you to forget? Who is telling you this isn't really true? You shouldn't believe this. This is coming from Mike. He's a knucklehead. Don't buy what he says, whatever. And I said, I think that it's important that when people do use affirmations, because I remember I didn't believe them either. But what I would try to do is get my emotions behind it and say it in a positive, enthusiastic way, as if I did believe it. It tended to stifle that, disbelief. I mean, it was like cheering up a football team, I could start to feel that. And I think they're incredibly powerful if we choose them correctly. And I had one that I used for myself and I had to change because it was, I'm high and alive at 175. And when I worked at the rehab, I had to change that. Okay. I couldn't very well use that one with them. They didn't appreciate it.
Yeah. You can't even talk about brownies here anymore without being misinterpreted.
Right. That's right. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I always think it is good to have a sense of humor in ourselves. And I was sharing with a couple of people when COVID first started that, and I talked a little bit about how to rise above the pandemic. I do a weekly Facebook post. Anyway, the guy at the coffee shop, when COVID first started, he's wearing a mask. And so we all had to wear masks, of course. Okay. And I know the guy, really nice guy, Azadine. I can never remember his name, but I remember where the license for his place is on the wall. So when I go in and he says, hi, Mike, I can go over. Oh yeah, Azadine. Yeah, there you go. So anyway, at the end of the thing, he gives me the coffee and I walk out and he goes like this for an elbow bump. And I had no idea what that was. So I start shaking his elbow. Okay. So about 2 weeks later, my daughter, she's with me this time, and Azadine does this, and I shake his elbow again, and she goes, Papa, that's an elbow bump, not a shake. And I go, well, some people might think I'm an idiot. Others might think I've innovated and I've come up with the elbow shake. So when that starts making its rounds, you can say your dad started that.
Yeah, she probably didn't take it that way.
No, I'm not doing that. Yeah, but I'll be on the lookout to see if there's other people that do that same stupid thing. Whatever.
That's awesome. Well, obviously, you mentioned your sense of humor. So, how important is play and fun?
Oh, I think it's very, very important, and it also is. Not to say that I think having breaks and doing certain things is always good, but also being able to find the humor in everyday stuff are kind of like mini little vacations, you know? And so when we don't just get so caught up in what we're doing and we lose the forest for the trees or see how absurd something we're doing, or if it is absurd, laughing about it rather than being angry and beating ourselves up and blaming the world and, you know, how do I go out and succeed after that? You know, so I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, I think, like I said, so many people are stuck in this fight, flight, and freeze mode, right? That's what's creating all this anxiety and stress in our culture, and humor and play can be a break from that and allow the
Hmm.
body to cycle some of those
Hmm.
chemicals we are supposed to experience when we're
Right,
happy
right.
and joyful, and
Yeah.
and I think people would be surprised when they get those because, like you said, they're
Hmm.
self-medicating, they're trying all these other addictions to either numb the feelings that are or emotions that are overwhelming rather than allowing themselves to experience, and then of course allowing their brain to fully
Hmm.
cycle all of these chemicals
Yeah.
it's designed to cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, I think when you say that, it's so important because if we if we never have that experience, we never get a little, you know, if a kid never learns how to feel what it's like when he's skins his knee as a man, I fall down and I'm crying in the puddle in the sidewalk, you know, it's, it's important to allow kids to have those experiences in a safe way and in a context and explain things to them rather than taking all that stuff away from them, you
Hmm.
know, because it really does that. I think it lowers the bar so that the less I'm used to, the less I feel like I can tolerate.
Oh,
And there's I look for it, it's not on YouTube anymore. I wish it was, but there was a commercial for Miller beer. And it says, you just hear this guy's doing something in the background, and the guy says, the voiceover says, you could have used your spare time to learn a new language or write the great American novel. Instead, you chose to do this. Do you have any idea what this was? Build a beer pyramid. Okay. And it says, you chose to do this. And then it goes, bravo, you know? And I think people do that though. That's how they, you know, get caught up in that stuff. And I was pleased that somebody recognized how ridiculous it is. But when we're in the middle of it, we don't.
well,
That's Hamilton.
and obviously our culture has celebrated, you know, everything from alcohol now to marijuana to all of these ways
Mm-hmm.
of numbing our feelings or you know adding stimulation or removing
Mm-hmm.
stimulation whichever direction you're choosing to go,
Mm-hmm.
um, rather than just fully experiencing
Right.
the stimulation that our body was designed with, which is pretty incredible in and
Right.
of itself. But so few people are actually experiencing it.
And I think that it lowers our tolerance even further because we're used to running from everything. And it used to be, you know, a club on the head was a big deal, but now a flick on the back of my neck is a big deal. And I react the same way to it as if that's what happened. And so I absolutely agree with you.
Well, you grew up with a Marine Corps sergeant dad, so having been a
Hmm.
Marine sergeant myself, I think about how the levels have, you know, we soften, we're softening the blow,
Right,
and
right.
pretty soon you're not even allowed to yell or, you know, it
Yeah.
it keeps transitioning to something softer and softer. But you don't want soft Marines.
No, no,
I
no. They have a job to do, you know. I
and
don't want to hear about it. Well, they're good at hugging, you know.
that's right.
They're, you know,
and but the truth, I think there is absolutely some truth to our culture softening the blow, you know,
mhm,
overprotecting our kids to the point where
mhm,
they don't fall down and they don't scrape their knee
mhm.
and they don't experience some pain.
Right.
More and more, I think it's kids aren't allowed to experience emotional pain, right? We protect them
Absolutely.
from, you know, we
Hmm.
protect them from the pet dying and the family member dying
Right,
and the
right.
experiencing these and
Hmm.
processing grief because the parents don't want to deal with it, so they obviously don't want to
Exactly. Yeah,
help their
that's
kids
exactly it. And I,
deal with it, and then their kids are so ill-equipped to deal with
hmm,
these emotional realities, right? You're going to fall in
right.
love and you're going to get heartbroken.
Hmm.
Those things have to happen.
Yeah,
That's part of, you know, and even some of the bullying. I agree bullying is a terrible, terrible thing. And yet
right.
there's an element to bullying that's just standing up for yourself. And there's an
Hmm.
element to bullying that prepares you, makes you a better person, right? In the boardroom, when the other guy says, well, that's not true, blah, 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 you've got something to stand on because, and so I'm not saying we justify bullying in any means, but I think there needs to be some intercommunication skills that are developed. I think they're developed in the rough, right? Like you said, they're developed when you're scraping your skin on the ground, and stuff has to hurt for us to make a change, for us to do something different. And if our dialogue, our conversations never hurt, like my wife and I have been together a long, long time, but the things that made our relationship stronger and better wasn't the hugging and kissing. It was the rough and ready grinding and pushing through the challenges that makes our relationship so much stronger. And so many people, like you said, are trying to avoid that. And that's the sad, they're avoiding growth opportunities.
Right. Yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. And that the protecting from any pain whatsoever, emotional, whatever, we make excuses for things. We hide things from people. Now, I think there's a difference. We don't exactly have to come up and, lower the boom on them. But I think at the same time, there's ways to talk to kids in age appropriate ways. And I think you hit an important point. If I don't talk about it, it's because I'm very uncomfortable with this. And also, I think that what holds a lot of people back is they've been holding on to this for so long. If they express it, they're afraid they're going to get lost in it and never come back from it. So it becomes an additional reason not to touch that subject because, and people say, well, I just saw red, oh, okay. Yeah. No, you had a thought before you saw red. And the thought was it's not, oh, this is a happy person giving me money. That wasn't the thought. The thought was, this is a dangerous situation and I need to hit him. And I think, again, going back to the idea of the misapplied strengths, with one of my kids, young guys, 19, was had come out of prison, and he came into our rehab, and somebody offered him a cigarette. And it was kind of a weird story, but he punched the guy in the face, and we sat and I talked to him about it. And of course, there's zero tolerance for violence. But I talked to the director, and fortunately, I had a good relationship with him. And I said, look, he's grown up in these places, and apparently, that's a sexual come on if you take a cigarette from somebody offers you a cigarette in the places where he'd grown up. So
there's a lot of message there.
That's right. So he punched the guy in the face. Anyway, so we worked it out. He apologized. The kid accepted it. We changed the orientation process so that new people coming in would understand that we're not going to have another example. Anyway, he came into my office and he's crying and says, Mike, I can't believe it. That's what I did was I punched this guy in the face. I said, Rich, look. I agree in that circumstance, that was not a good thing. However, that's another example of a misapplied strength. If you and I go to prison, you will succeed much better than I will. Okay. Because you know how to fight. Okay. But I'm not going to prison. Okay. Right. Now, there's a few other possibilities. If you become like an MMA fighter or you're walking down a dark alley and there's a bunch of gang members there, then fighting is a really good thing. But let's make that about 1% of your person. And let's develop the other skills. And if you need it, you can pull that one out. You don't want to just make it go away.
Right. Well, and recognizing that really it's just a learning a different culture, right? And now you're trying to help him transition out of that culture into a new culture, which is really new for him because he hasn't really experienced it in this way.
Yeah.
That's so challenging. So how have routines helped you in taming the inner critic?
Well, I think there's a book that, quite frankly, I wasn't a great fan of the book, but I love the title. And it was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And I think that's a great example of what I do is I start to recognizing it. And I recognize my inner critic earlier and earlier, sooner and sooner so that I don't get stuck. Because like when people say, what is it? Isaac Newton's a body at rest tends to stay at rest and a body in motion tends to stay in motion. And I always say, yeah, my butt glued to the couch tends to stay on the couch. And so I try not to make that a pattern because it will be where I live. Okay. And so I think having a schedule, whether you're working full-time, part-time, retired, I think it's good to have routine. to say we're going to do certain things today and what have you, because it also helps us stay on track. And they don't have to be, today I'm going to climb Mount Everest. Today it could be, I'm going to walk for half a block, for 10 minutes, and if we make it so unrealistic, I believe that's also the inner critic kicking in, because it wants us to be perfect, but we can never accomplish it. So now we can just stay at home and, do something entirely different and medicate our emotional fibromyalgia. So I think it's very, very important for people to have routine. And even if they do, we're going to have a routine of when we, talk tonight, talk this week or whatever, I think there is a good, and even if the things like watching a TV show or something can be a family time, like let's sit around and have this good time together. So I think it's a very important point.
Absolutely. So what has been the impact of being an author?
Well, I think it's to me, it's hopefully people will appreciate. I've had some, several people have bought the book, not millions at this point, but that'll be the case soon. But I think I did it. It was mostly for me, and it was for a couple of reasons. One, I wanted to share the information with other people, and also my inner critic was kicking up probably the most it has in years when I started writing this book. Okay. And it's been kind of a long term. I'm 66 years old. And, when people are 14 and they're writing their memoirs, I still don't think I'm old enough to write a memoir, but it's a little bit autobiographical, or a lot of it is autobiographical, but I make the points and I have a workbook with it so people can actually do some exercises with each chapter and develop some things. And I think the other thing that I think is, in addition to the routine, is kind of, in my mind, routine with a purpose. So if one of my quotes is that life challenges are mere flickers in relation to the bright light of our clearly defined purpose. When we know what we're going for, and that's what we're focused on, the other ones are they're there, but just I can deal with that. It doesn't become our focus. And if we don't have that, we don't have a purpose and a life direction, so to speak. We're kind of going around from one thing to the next.
Oh, so powerful. Absolutely. All right. So what's the big dream?
For what?
For Mike.
Okay. That I think being a grandfather and being able to support my kids from time to time emotionally, or even with being near them and being able to do those things. I think I think there's the battle between Dylan Thomas, poet, said something about don't go gently into that dark night, fight against the dying of the light. And then I think on the other hand, and also how do you age gracefully? I try to find that balance. And I think that's what I hope that, that I'll have made my mark
Nice.
on some people's lives.
Love it. All right. So you spent an hour having coffee with a young entrepreneur and you want to leave him with Mike's words of wisdom. What would you share?
Well, now you've already used me up. Let me see here. I think I would go back to, again, view life challenges as mere flickers in relation to our bright light of our clearly defined purpose. If we don't know what our purpose is, that's okay too. But don't then self-medicate to get away from thinking about what it is, because that's uncomfortable. And we try to erase all levels of discomfort. And so the more we do it, and then how can we help other people? If we're a teacher, if every time a kid skins their knees, it's a major medical event, and we have the parents have to be called and rushed to it's a dang scraped knee, it lowers that. And I think all of our tolerance for society. So when we go out and people are in line at the grocery store and they start getting agitated with each other, about stupid stuff. And it's just, I think it's because we can't tolerate any discomfort. There's like this guy, the old lady walking down the street. What the heck's the matter with her? Let's take a look at those things and say, how do I live gracefully throughout the course of my day?
Well, and being able to ask, why is that making me uncomfortable? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
But you
good.
have to know that you're uncomfortable, and then you have to ask the question, because people are just like, well, she irritated me and she upset me. Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
so good. Mike, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Sure.
What a great conversation. I appreciate your stories and definitely
Great.
love the concept of your book and speaking to that voice.
Yep. Can I just tell you, I just wanted to give myself a little shameless plug
Do
for
it.
my website is mikemccaffreycoaching.com. And also I'm coming out, I do have a not live 9-week course that I'm going to be teaching based on the book. And it's 6 group sessions. And then weeks 3, 6, and 9 will be one-on-one coaching with me. That's going to be coming up pretty soon. And so I'll be hoping to encourage other people to take a look at these things in their lives and make some improvements.
Absolutely. We'll include those in the description as well.
Great. I appreciate it. So, well, it's been wonderful, Robert. I sure appreciate the invitation and look forward to connecting again in the future.